One Piece Film Red is not only the highest grossing One Piece film of all time in Japan, but it's straight up the highest grossing film in Japan in 2022. And I got to see it early at the One Piece Film Red premiere in New York City this past Thursday, so I'm gonna do my best to give a Jeremy Jahns-esque spoiler-free review because I have a lot of thoughts about this movie. To give you some context, Film Red is the 15th One Piece movie, but really it's the 5th of the newer generation. You see, for the longest time, Oda was never really involved with the movie making process, so a lot of them were recaps or just fan fictions by other directors, but that all changed with the One Piece movie Strong World, which Oda personally wrote the story for. He did that in celebration of One Piece's 10th anniversary, and as a result, we got some canon material in the movie from characters like Shiki to Chapter 0, and the movie itself was fantastic, so from that point on, Oda became more involved in the movies. So for the following movies of Z, Gold, and Stampede, Oda served as an overseer or executive producer, and the same is true for this newest movie, Film Red, but it is still special because for this movie, Oda became heavily involved in celebration for One Piece's 25th year anniversary. In fact, the main producer of the movie even said that this is the movie Oda has been involved in the most, as he is serving as an executive producer, character designer, and script reviewer. So with Oda being heavily involved in this movie and major box office numbers coming out of Japan and Shanks making an appearance, I'm sure the question you're all wondering is, did it live up to the hype? And well, the answer to that question is really gonna come down to your expectations and preferences. Because this movie for me was definitely a mixed bag with some things that I absolutely adored and some things that I really did not enjoy. And the first thing we have to talk about is Uta, who's one of the main characters in the movie, so much so that I would argue that she's the protagonist of the movie. This movie spends a ton of time really focusing on her character and character arc, and for me, much like the movie, her character was a bit of a mixed bag, and the first topic I want to talk about is the music. Because music is a huge part of this movie because of how heavily connected it is to Uta. Not only is it her devil fruit power, but it's also her profession. So we get a lot of music in this movie, and for the most part, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a super creative new spin on a One Piece film. Some of the songs in the movie were absolute bangers, and they're already topping some charts in Japan. And I also really like how they didn't just stick to one genre. There was really a good variety of music. Of course, you have your classic anime OST type of feel of music, but there was also some rock, even some music with some hip-hop inspirations. And for the most part, I really enjoyed the music in this movie and how it was utilized creatively. Now, one thing I will say, after the movie, I spoke to Roger's Base, and he had said that the lyrics of some of the songs were actually really important, but I personally can't actually speak on that because I was sitting at the very front, so when there were 4 lines of subtitles, I just had to skip the lyrics. But yeah, it seems like the lyrics were another element that they used creatively to really enhance the film, and I gotta say, you gotta give them props for trying something new creatively for such a big film. At the same time though, I will say that the music is not gonna be for everyone because there is a lot of music. So much so that the first 2 acts of the movie might start to feel like a musical to some people, and you might not dig that. Even for me personally, at a certain point, I was like, okay, maybe we don't need a song here as well. An entirely different topic though, how music was used as Uta's power, that was something I thought wasn't executed as well. Because it started off really interesting in how it was pairing with the music of the movie, and everything was still very reasonable while also being creative. But as the movie went on, Uta just kept doing crazier and crazier things that really have no business with music being a power. So much so that I would say that Uta's devil fruit is probably one of the strongest in the entire universe. So in that aspect, I think they went a little overboard to an unbelievable extent. But in general, I would still say the music in this movie was a positive experience for me. What's more of a mixed bag though is Uta's character arc, and like I said earlier, she's a major part of this film. I think she's pretty much the protagonist. And this is where things go a little downhill for Uta for me, but I actually start off with what I loved, which was Uta's relationship with Luffy and Shanks. That was something the movie did incredibly well because despite Uta being an entirely new character, you really buy the relationship with Uta and Luffy and Uta and Shanks. Like when you see these characters interacting with each other, you really believe their history and connection and how much they really care for each other, and to be able to do that with just some flashbacks and on-screen interactions was amazing. The problem is that was the only reason I really cared about Uta, because her character arc in the movie is kinda messy. It starts off artificially where she has a major personality change because of something else, so that already felt like was a little cheap and a bit of a shortcut, but then we eventually find out how she really went through her character arc, and it just made me kinda not like her as a character anymore. And by the end of the movie, the only reason I cared about her her was because I cared about Luffy and Shanks caring about her. So as far as things that I did not like in the movie, I would say Uta's character arc and development is probably near the top of the list. And that gets us to the structure of this movie, because my god, is it an absolute roller coaster. Starting off in Act 1, the movie jumps into action really quickly, and I really like that fast-paced start. Tons of things are just happening at once. We're getting some buildup of Luffy and Uta's relationship. We're seeing a lot of Straw Hat interactions with Jinbei included, which is great because even in the manga, we haven't gotten too much of that. On top of that, you have some absolute banger music playing, some fan service moments going down, and overall Act 1 was just a really enjoyable start to this movie. The problem though is Act 2, because this section of the movie is really where a lot of the buildup should have been happening, but instead it just felt like an absolute mess of just 100 different things being thrown together. Things are just kind of happening. A bunch of characters just all show up at once, and their interactions don't really make that much sense either. There's something in the movie that happens with the Sunny that is pretty much pointless. The entirety of Act 2 was pretty much just a jumbled mess that was trying to be a setup, but it was just an absolute snooze fest. And the reason for that, I think, is the problem and the greatness of this movie, which is Act 3. Because Act 3 of this movie was an absolute banger. It is just non-stop, terrific, amazing action. We get so many peak iconic moments. I'm talking moments that are gonna fire up power scaling discussions and involving fan favorite characters. And overall, it's just a lot of dope shit happening that have people cheering at the theater. And honestly, I really don't think anyone's gonna argue that the last peak was not absolutely amazing. It might have been the greatest final act in any One Piece movie. But the problem is, as amazing as the final act was, the process of getting there was just an absolute mess. Honestly, it felt like they put all their energy on making this final 20 minutes of this movie happen, and then when it came time to actually set it up and plan it, they just threw everything together and said that whatever, they'll get to Act 3 and they're gonna love it. If I had to make a comparison, I would say the final act of this movie is like Avenger Endgame levels of hype. Just an action-packed fan service final act that has everybody cheering. The problem with this movie though is that it does not have an Infinity War type of build up to that final act. So in the end, as hype as the final act was, the story of the movie might feel a little empty, which is why I'm definitely expecting some mixed reactions for this movie. People that really care about the story might end up calling it mid, and people who are just there to enjoy the peak moments are gonna love it. With that being said though, we gotta talk about Shanks and the Red Hair Pirates and their involvement in the movie, because I'm sure that's why a lot of people are super excited for the movie. And honestly, I thought Shanks and the Red Hair Pirates were one of the best parts of the movie, and the movie used them perfectly. First off, they are not just in the movie for flashbacks and cameos, they are fully in the movie, and it's probably the most we've ever seen of them. And what this movie does really well, in my opinion, is use the Red Hair Pirates to just a perfect amount. It's just enough to give us some iconic moments and for us to walk away from the movie satisfied, but at the same time, it doesn't go too far for things that they should be saving for the manga and keeps us excited to see more of Shanks and the Red Hair Pirates. Besides that though, a quick thing I also want to touch on is the canon material we get in this movie, because Oda is heavily involved with it, and there's absolutely some canon material in this movie. Some is related to some theories and lore, some is related to just power scaling. A while back, I did do a video on the canon material relating to Shanks and the Red Hair Pirates that do not involve the plot of the movie, which you could check out right here. But even besides that, there were a few little low-key things in there that I think could be really important, and I definitely want to talk about that, so let me know if you want to see a spoiler discussion of this movie either now or when the movie comes out. But yeah, for me, this movie was a damn good movie.